Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Mayor Tubbs, are you here?
Yes. Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, now I can see you. Can you see me? I'm
Yes, I can
Jong-sung.
see you.
Jong-sung, you? Oh, so yeah. Nice to see you, and I'm relieved that we are now connected. Yeah. So we'll have American subsession first. So yeah. So originally, Representative Yong Hye-in of South Korea was supposed to speak first, but I will let her speak later after the American session. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, you're welcome. So you speak 15 minutes, and Scott, right there, Scott will speak for 50 minutes, and then we'll take questions from audience. So 15 minutes Q&A session. So that will be the American session. Okay? Then, yeah, then I will accommodate other speakers. So that makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So 자, 내가 still watch? 지금 몇 분이에요? 54분, 54. Yeah. So Michael, you can come back 1 minute before 7 p.m. your time, or you may stay, whichever you like.
Okay. 1 minute before 6 p.m.
Oh, I can see there. Yeah. 저기요, 제가 말할 때는 이거 나오죠. 여기 안에서 왔다 갔다 하는 게 괜찮아요. 네, 네. 네.
저희 줌할 때 이게 저희 하이브리드잖아요. 하이브리드 있는데 줌에서도 통역, 줌에서 통역해서 들을 수 있어요. 이제 시작하실 때 이제 소개를 그런
그거는 그냥 여기서 오라면 되게
네. 지금 시작.
네, 안녕하십니까 여러분. 비엔 대회 둘째 날이 밝았습니다. 10시부터 시작하는 전체 세션 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 현장에 좌장분들 혹은 발제자분들 계시면 앞쪽 테이블에 나오셔서 착석 부탁드리겠습니다. Good morning, everyone. This is the second day of BN Congress. Welcome to the first session starting from 10 a.m. If you are speaker or chair of this session, please come forward and sit down on the table. Thank you.
Hello. So I'm Jong-sung.
I'm Aida.
Ida.
Pilot.
Ida. Martinez. Tinaut.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Yeah.
교수님 좌장 안 내리네. 좌장은 저 오른쪽에.
이거 선생님 이거 누구지? 본은 챙기셨죠?
Yeah. Take a seat here, please. Let me explain briefly about how we will proceed. So, Michael comes home aware of Saturn. He has to leave in an hour early. So, yeah, Michael comes. Yeah, he has to leave early. So, he is participating via Zoom, by the way. So, we've decided that we'll have American subsession first. So Scott, Michael Tubbs and Scott Sentence will speak first for 15 minutes each, and then we will take questions from the audience about for the two presenters for about 15 minutes. So after 45 minutes of subsession, American subsession, we'll Representative Yong, Hye-in, and Tinaut, and eduarudu. Yeah, please. You will speak 50 minutes each and take questions. Okay? Sorry for the
We
last.
have to something to notice when you after presentation or Q&A, and then you have to turn off this mic. Okay. Mic. And there.
뭐 실대로. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So, yeah, did you have a good sleep last night? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I really. Good morning, everyone. I am moderator of this plenary session 3, basic income at the thresholds, policies, experiments, and legislation. And before we start the session, the organizers will have some announcements. Do you have a
안녕하세요. 서포터즈 권정하입니다.
Morning,
오늘
I'm
세션에
Jong-sung,
함께 해주셔서 감사합니다. 이번 대회는
for
오프라인 하이브리드
Business
진행되고
Conference. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we have both in-person and online participants. Those of you who are in this hall, please make sure you use a microphone. For questions, please raise your hand and wait for the staff to pass a microphone to you. We're going to start in 1 minute.
Thank you for joining us. 22nd BN Congress is conducted in an online offline hybrid format. Therefore, for those attending in person, please use the microphone when speaking. We kindly ask audience to raise your hands and use microphone when speaking any questions or comments. The session will start shortly. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Jong-sung, guest professor and the director of Inequality and Social Policy Institute at Gachon University in Korea. And we have 5 presenters today in 120 minutes. So I will let each speaker to speak for 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, I will not let you speak further. So my job today is time management, basically. Yeah. So unlike yesterday, the 2 plenary sessions had 2 speakers each, but today we have 5 speakers. So you have to understand. Yeah. And Michael Taus, former mayor of Stockton City, is participating via Zoom, and he has to leave in an hour early. So we changed the order of the presentations. So we'll have American subsession first. Michael Taus and Scott Sentence will speak first. So after hearing 2 presentations, we'll have Q&A for 15 minutes. So after finishing the American subsession, other 3 speakers will speak for 15 minutes each, and then we'll take questions from the audience, offline first and online later. And of the 5 presenters, 4 presenters' bios are in the program. But unfortunately, Eduardu Suplisi, former senator of Brazil, and still he's working as state deputy of Sao Paulo, Brazil. So I cannot introduce him in detail. So you can see his bio from Wikipedia. So he was economist. He's still economist, professor of economics, and he was the leader of Workers' Party, or PT, in Brazil. He competed for the nomination of presidential candidacy, but he was apparently defeated by Lula. So Lula became the president, not him. But anyway, he was a long advocate for basic income in Brazil, and with Lula inaugurating as president again, so we'll hear from Eduardu what is happening in Brazil. So we'll have the American session first. So Michael, I really can't see here. from the screen. So, Michael, yeah, would you speak for 15 minutes? You can't hear me? Michael,
Yes,
yeah. So, can you speak for 15 minutes?
absolutely. I'm sorry. I was trying to follow the translation.
Ah, okay.
But thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry I'm not able to be there in person. And to the member of parliament, to the former senator, to the government official, and to one of the most prolific voices in the space, Scott. So good to see you all and looking forward to learning from. 3 weeks ago, I was just in Kenya at the site of one of Give Directly's universal basic income villages. And the time there reminded me, much like the gathering we're having now, and you all know this too well, but we're talking about a global solution to a global problem. That in every nation on this earth, there is just unacceptable levels of economic insecurity. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll talk faster then. So, like I was saying, I think the time in Kenya was very instructive because it really illustrated that we're having a global conversation about a global issue. So I've just been inspired by the work that's been happening across the world, and I want to thank you guys. 7 years ago, when I was mayor of Stockton, California, a small city in California, we decided we would pilot, test, try out what happens if you do what the research says to do in terms of empowering people, in terms of helping people, in terms of solving problems, and that's give people money. And I had no idea that small demonstration, just 125 people, just $500 a month, just for 2 years, would be joined today by over 150 mayors and county officials in the United States who have made basic income a part of their governing platform. I had no idea that we would have cities like St. Paul, Minnesota, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, trying to figure out how to create a guaranteed income or a basic income for their citizens. And Scott will speak later, but I think a large part of that has been just the amazing community organizing and awareness raising that's been happening. And a lot of it is also sort of U.S. leaders waking up and realizing that a basic income isn't just about the future, it isn't just about automation, it isn't just about displacement. It's not just about climate relief, even though it's part of all those things, but it's really part of the civil rights tradition that the folks we lionize and the folks we memorialize. We're all talking about the need for a guaranteed income or a basic income in the United States 50, 60 years ago. So in the 60s, Dr. King was introduced to this idea by the National Welfare Rights Organization, a group of Black women on welfare who said the same things we're saying today, that the welfare bureaucratic system doesn't work, it lacks dignity, it's inefficient, it's not helpful, and it creates perverse incentives, which actually forces people to stay stuck rather than move forward. And they socialized the idea to him. And he talked about it in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? At the same time, the Black Panther Party also said in their 10-point plan, either a job guarantee and or a guaranteed income. And the idea being that given the amount of wealth we have, given what we know is needed to be human and participate in society, that no one should have nothing, that everyone deserves at least a floor. And it's sort of from those leaders and those giants that the elected officials of the United States have been inspired to do what they can in terms of piloting and testing idea, with the hope that we have enough evidence that the federal government will step in. And I'm impressed with the momentum and what's been done so far, but we definitely have a long way to go. Although I would underline what's most inspiring is that in 2017, when I said we're going to give some people in Stockton money, the conversation was, can we give people money? And now it's moved, at least in the States, from not can we give people money, but who do we give money to and how much and for how long? Which seems like a small jump, but it's a huge jump because it challenges long-held notions in the States about who's deserving and who's not, a long-standing biases around sort of work and dignity being attached to work. And I think what we're showing with the pilots being done at the city and county levels in the United States is that dignity can't be attached to work first. It has to be attached to our humanity. And once our policies reflect the notion that all humans have dignity, regardless of what they do or don't do, then we'll see sort of basic income become a policy. Another big focus of ours has been sort of in storytelling. Again, given the diversity of the United States, given the history and the persistence of racism and sexism in the country, that part of the political barrier in the States is sort of getting people to see that it's okay to give people who look different than me money. It's okay to give mothers money. It's okay to give Black people money. It's okay to give immigrants money. It's okay to give folks money who are oftentimes other and marginalized. So we've been spending a lot of time on storytelling, on having participants talk about sort of what a guaranteed income or a basic income means for them and their families. We just produced a feature-length documentary that premiered at Tribeca Film Festival, an hour and 20 minutes, showing stories of people who look like the country in St. Paul, Minnesota, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Los Angeles, California, and the great things they were doing with the money. Because of the United States context, what's challenging but also exciting about this work is it's forcing us to reckon with all type of other conversations, particularly around, do we really mean what we say on paper when we say that all men and women are created equal, as our founding document states? And then as I conclude, I would also say that COVID-19 provided an opportunity to really astroturf this conversation about giving people money or a basic income. And it took that emergency, it took that pandemic for a lot of elected officials to open their eyes and get courageous. And I would argue it was that coupled with the murder of George Floyd, where folks were protesting and taking to the streets during the pandemic saying Black Lives Matter, that really gave folks the courage to say, we have to respond to the structural violence in our country, the avoidable impairment of basic human needs in our country, the disgusting amounts of poverty in our country. So again, we have a long way to go, but just like the legends we look up to, folks like Dr. King and the Black Panthers, we understand that our job is unfinished until it's done. And we will continue to advocate and push for and fight for an economy that works for everyone. A capitalist society that works for everyone, if that's the economic system we'll continue to have. and really use sort of the cash and the basic income to reflect, again, what we know is true. That we don't have to, it's like the conversation about what the ceiling isn't the important one. The important one is that no one should have nothing and everyone should have a floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Scott's sentence, the known for most effective basic income activists in the United States. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me from my home in Washington, D.C. to be here in person today. I'm excited to share with you all a summary of what's been happening in the U.S. in the basic income movement recently, and how just providing people cash appears to be taking root in the U.S. as program after program continues building the case. For those who don't know me or my work, I'm just a guy who happened to get really into the concept of basic income 10 years ago. I get asked all the time how that happened. So long story short, I was on Reddit one day, read the many comments in a discussion thread about how quickly technology was advancing, and yet no one was talking about it. Found out about UBI, started researching it, and there was no going back after that. 2 years later, I was living with a perpetual crowd-funded monthly basic income floor that has ever since enabled me to focus on UBI full time. It was actually through gaining my own basic income floor that I learned firsthand how truly transformative UBI will be society-wide. First, I learned what it meant to feel a real sense of security, and how little security I ever felt before that. It's like we're all fish swimming in an ocean of insecurity. It's hard to understand what security really means by just reading and talking about it, when all we've ever known is insecurity. I also learned that people underestimate just how big a deal even a small UBI is. A couple $100s a month may not sound like much, but when you know for certain it's going to be there, you know for certain that at the very least, you're not going to go hungry. That feeling of not having to ever worry about coming up with money for food is not at all insignificant. It's paramount. When describing a significant result from the Stockton, California pilot, former Mayor Michael Tubbs has said the mental health impact was akin to antidepressants. And even though it was only $500 a month, an amount some people claimed would have no effect, it also doubled the rate of full-time employment among recipients compared to non-recipients. A story that illustrates that impact is how one of the pilot participants took a day off work to secure a better job. His basic income afforded him the time to do that and empowered him to take that risk. If all we're doing is trying to come up with next month's rent, it's that much harder for us to afford the time and risk it takes to find the job that fits us best, or at least better. These are the kinds of stories being generated across the US, in addition to the empirical data. The new wave of American basic income pilots began with one city in 2018, which turned into 11 mayors across 11 cities in June 2020 with the launch of Mayors for Guaranteed Income, which has since expanded to over 116 mayors as of June. And across all pilots, MGI and non-MGI affiliated, over 100 pilots have already launched or completed, with around 60 currently active. What was once just a group of mayors for guaranteed income has also become a group of 28 county officials for guaranteed income across 21 counties, and even a documentary titled It's Basic on a national 16-month tour of 50 cities. That's also not the only documentary to be created as the result of a US pilot. A program in Chelsea, Massachusetts that provided monthly cash instead of food to over 2,000 households resulted in a documentary titled Raising the Floor that's currently in the film festival circuit. In addition, a docuseries titled Bootstraps that filmed 10 households across the US living with a basic income of $1,000 a month per adult and $333 per month per kid for 2.5 years is currently in post-production. It's important to note that none of the US pilots are saturation site pilots where income is received universally, but the huge diversity of pilots and the participants they enroll does paint a picture of universality. An unconditional monthly cash program that only enrolls the unhoused is not UBI. But because UBI will include everyone who is unhoused, a good story from a homelessness-focused pilot can show how effective UBI will be in reducing homelessness. For example, Miracle Messages, a charity in San Francisco that was already focused on helping the unhoused get housed, decided to provide $500 a month to 15 homeless people for 6 months. And the result was that 2/3 of them found housing. It was so successful that it has expanded its cash giving with the intent of providing $750 a month for 1 year to 100 more unhoused people in a randomized controlled trial. Here is a summary of most of the many different groups of people besides the unhoused participating in America's Guaranteed Basic Income pilots. Pregnant women, unpaid caregivers, former foster youth, youth at high risk of crime, the formerly incarcerated, young parents, single parents, high school students, LGBTQ, artists, community college students, refugees, pre-retirement age seniors, people with disabilities, welfare benefit recipients, and entrepreneurs. Missing from this list, I feel, are groups like coal miners, veterans, first responders, and scientists. Consider who you think is missing. What would make for new politically impactful UBI stories? Besides the great variety of people in the US pilots, there's also a diversity of payment amounts, durations, and frequencies. The smallest amount of basic income is $50 a week, and the largest is $1,204 a month. The shortest duration has been 3 months, and the longest is 5 years. The various frequencies are weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, and semi-annually. All of this variety can help us learn more about optimal payment frequency, and if certain amounts of UBI provide greater bang per dollar than smaller or larger amounts. The US also just ran what was essentially the largest US-based basic income pilot ever by providing $250 to $300 a month per kid to 9 out of 10 kids in the US in 2021. On average, that worked out to around $462 a month to 36 million families. The result was the biggest drop in child poverty in American history, cutting it about in half, with no drop in unemployment. The number of parents selling their blood plasma also fell, and fewer parents started abusing drugs. Symptoms of anxiety also dropped by over 13%. And when the payments stopped, parental unemployment increased, likely due to a decreased ability to afford childcare. America's UBI that has existed in Alaska for over 40 years now also continues to teach us more about UBI as new studies of it are done. 2 recent studies found that an additional $1,000 in UBI reduced the likelihood that a child is referred to Child Protective Services by 2 percentage points, or about 10% on average, and also increased voter turnout by 7.6 percentage points. Some lessons that have been learned in the process of running our money pilots are the following. Input from participants is helpful. Listen to them. Maybe they'd prefer they get paid mid-month versus the first, or maybe they'd prefer a debit card instead of direct deposit. Control group retention is a challenge. Consider how to create sufficient incentive to keep collecting data from control groups. Local universities can be great research partners, and as can local nonprofits be useful for participant recruitment and funding. Trust can be a barrier, and basic income can feel like something too good to be true. A trusted local org can help conquer the obstacles of disbelief and distrust. Benefit cliffs can be really tricky, especially for those with disabilities who aren't allowed to earn additional income without losing their disability income. Participants need to know they could lose something they're already getting unless waivers are secured. Also consider what happens to those who apply to be pilot participants who aren't selected. What happens to them? It's smart to engage them in some way and keep them engaged. These are the people who may be willing to be civically active in support of UBI. Finally, what about storytelling? Don't just collect data. Make a plan for telling the stories. Consider collecting those stories via audio or video. Consider also preparing participants on how to be effective in public speaking and how to communicate with the media. Special storytelling cohorts that aren't part of the experimental group or the control group can be great for training and communicating their stories. The supporting data is only able to tell with cold data. I can't stress enough how important these stories are. UBI will be won or lost based on stories, regardless of what all the mountains of data from the pilots they originate from have to say. One extremely powerful story can mean the difference between basic income for all actually happening or not. But there is no such thing as one perfect story for all. What's needed are stories that people can see themselves in. If you're an artist just barely getting by now thanks to generative AI's ability to create the images people want to see in just seconds, you need to see a story about how having a basic income transformed an artist's life for the better. You need to experience their story and think, that could be me if UBI existed. That's how an artist becomes a UBI activist. That's why I'm especially excited about the artist-based income pilots in the US and also Ireland. With thousands of artists living with basic income for years, that's thousands of stories about a demographic of people who are humanities storytellers. Hopefully, these kinds of pilots can lead to a lot more content about the incredible effectiveness of UBI. It's the power of the stories of UBI in action that is why I recently founded my own nonprofit in the US called the Income to Support All Foundation, or It's a Foundation for short, as a nod to what UBI can succinctly be defined as. It's a foundation. The goal of It's a Foundation is to get the projects launched that will get a small UBI going right now, permanently, and tell the powerful stories that result from people living with UBI. We hope to have over 100,000 people living with a small basic income of $50 a week by 2026. And we hope to share the stories with the greatest potential impact to inspire a national movement. I have hope that the US can get some amount of national UBI going by the end of the decade. Polling to gauge national support has been going steadily up. In 2019, it was 43%. A year later, it was 55%. Most recent polling earlier this year showed it now.
실험을 합니다.
Most recent polling showed it at 61%, including 50% of Republicans. I think OpenAI's launch of ChatGPT last November has helped. I think OpenAI will also provide another boost in support next year. Sam Altman has said his 5-year UBI pilot using an RCT design with 1,000 UBI recipients and 2,000 in the control group that has been taking place across 2 states will finish next year. And with those results, in 2024, they will begin pushing for national UBI legislation. The first permanent local guaranteed income program also now already exists in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where due to the success of their pilot, every resident with a dependent under 21 living at or below 250% of the poverty line now qualifies for $500 a month for 18 months. It's not UBI, but it's another step forward. My hope is that we can continue taking these steps in the US and that other countries, including yours, will also continue taking your own steps. And that one step at a time, some country will get to UBI first, and then the rest of the world will follow. The big question is, who will be first? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So about the power of stories of UBI will inspire everyone in the United States and in the world. Yeah, I hope. So we'll take questions from the audience. Please raise hands. And yeah, Professor Guy is standing. Give him mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for excellent presentations, and congratulations on Michael Tubbs' initiative and the inspiration that he's had in the United States. I'm a co-founder of Bien, and we've been working on basic income since 1986. We've got many pilots and experiments that we've done in developing countries and elsewhere. And I agree with Scott's assessment in the sense that storytelling is a vital part of the evidence, and not enough attention is given to it by so-called serious academic scholars looking at it. I'm a professor, so I'm part of that. But I think the anthropological findings from our huge Indian pilot, where we collected data for 12,000 people, but we did case studies during the course of several years, and we learned far more from those anecdotal insights. The big question, I think, for the United States at this moment, and there's a question I want to pose to both of you, is the danger that what are selective schemes, which are experiments rather than proper basic income pilots, as you both understand, will risk going into the means testing guaranteed, so-called guaranteed income schemes, rather than in the direction of a basic income as a rights-based policy. And I think the challenge, both in the United States and in Europe and in places like Korea, is to make sure the momentum goes in the direction of a more universalistic approach. So I wonder how both of you assess that particular danger. I think reflections on that would be very useful. Thank you very much.
Shall I take a couple of questions more, or yeah, would you? Yeah, Mr. An.
예, 그 발표 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question for Michael Tubbs. To my understanding, well, when it comes to guaranteed income or a basic income in the US, the idea emerged due to the reduction of employment and jobs because of technological development. And in the 1960s, under the Johnson administration, this anti-poverty movement was there. So these are the factors that played out, I believe. And I believe that led to the racist split line, if you will. And also going beyond egalitarian civil rights, but the movement sought something more fundamental than that. And when there is this emancipation of the Black slaves in the US, well, the suggestions and proposals by the Bureau, how the slaves who are emancipated will be given 40 acres,
경제적 기반을 마련해 준다.
and how they can be given the foundations for basic economy and basic living. So for those who used to be slaves and compensation for them, and also guaranteeing a basic income. Well, how are these two related? So compensation for this particular group, does it mean anything for a basic income or a definition of a basic income? And about that, when it comes to the Black movement or anti-poverty movement, how do you think this has a significance in these movements?
Let us take one more question via Zoom, and then let Michael and Scott respond. So, Alexander Irving? Alexander? Would you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, my question goes in the same direction of Professor Standing questions, a bit more about internationality. I think that the US can play a vital role because of its culture and language for the world, but the stories has to be real international. And Michael Tubbs was just saying he was going to Kenya. Maybe he can tell something about this. And in the other, it was mentioned Ireland. So how can some stories be universal in their approach, that they reach more of mankind? That would be my question.
Thank you. So, who will respond first? Michael, would you respond first?
Yeah, I have to. I didn't get the translation for the second question, so if someone could translate that one for me, I could answer that one too.
Yes, 그냥 간단.
Okay, to be brief, the guaranteed income and anti-poverty movement in these contexts, how a basic income movement is related to this, and I believe that this is related to the racial split line, if you will. And if you look at the history of emancipation of the slaves in the US, the compensatory definition is also relevant. So when it comes to compensation for particular groups in the history, and when we look at a basic income in a universal sense, how do these two relate? And how do this compensation for particular group link to universality of a basic income? And how does the US look at this issue? And do you have any tension dealing with the basic income issue?
Let know everyone participating via Zoom, there is a simultaneous translation. And so, yeah. Okay. So Michael, can you respond?
Yeah, it sounds like the first two questions are related, so I'll answer them both together if that's okay. And first of all, Professor, thank you for your leadership, for starting this work before I was even alive. I wasn't even born to 1990. So the fact that this was around in 1986, I think is a testament to your foresight, your co-founder's foresight, and also a testament for how long it takes sort of for the body politic to catch up with what's necessary and what's needed. So I just want to thank you for your leadership. In terms of the question around a guaranteed income versus a universal basic income, I really approach as really a political question, right? In terms of what's politically doable, feasible in the moment to get to the North Star goal. And it was hard enough to get mayors circled around the idea of giving some people money. It would have been the pace of change and sort of the pace of adaptation and the pace, at least, of political leaders sort of championing this as their issue would have been much slower if it had been started like universal for everyone. And I think part of it's just the the quirks of just the American democracy. I mean, we're a country without even universal health care for everyone. There's very few truly universal programs in the States, and there's a lot of reasons for that we could go into. But for that reason, I think sort of a guaranteed income is a great first step. And I think for me, it's also a question of goals. And my ultimate goal is to end poverty, right? And I think both a guaranteed and a universal basic income does that. So I'm supportive of both. But I'm also fine with a guaranteed income insofar as it ends poverty. And I also just thinking pragmatically for the United States, there's no way we'll get to anything universal before we try it out for some people first. Like we just can't, it's not just gonna be a rollout. Like I think we have to build the guardrails. And I think sort of a guaranteed income is a nice on-ramp to do that. And I think the best example of that in the States is the child tax credit. During the pandemic, the federal government sent, not everyone, but sent families with children money per child. But Republicans and Democrats who received the money liked it. And the idea is to get that sort of enshrined in law, hopefully in 24, as the first sort of guaranteed income policy and use that as a building block to get us to universal basic income, because it's obvious we're going to have to get there given sort of what we're seeing with not just AI, but also with like climate disasters and sort of guaranteed income or basic universal basic income being a tool of pandemic preparedness, being a tool of climate resilience. So we'll get there. I just don't think we're going to get there in one swoop. And I think sort of guaranteed income is a great first step, particularly when we're starting from nothing, like and no one. And then the last question was about going to Kenya in sort of a universal approach from Alexander. And I absolutely agree. And I think that's why I took the trip to Kenya. And in the States, sometimes we could be very myopic and think sort of we're the only ones doing something or we're the only ones that know something. So I think sort of gatherings like this one, again, I wish I could be there in person, but my wife was like, you can't go across the world twice in a month that we have kids. But I think conversations like these are so important because we're not just talking about an economic issue. I really think we're talking about a human rights issue and one that has to be elevated to the UN and other places around the fact that in the 21st century, in 2023, we should live in a poverty-free world. We should live in a world where everyone has a floor. I think sort of storytelling and seeing the things that connect us will help us get there. And the last thing I'll say is what was fascinating to me in Kenya, in the village, was that I felt like I was still in LA, or I was in Stockton, or I was in all the places across the country I go to, because folks were saying the same thing about money. They said the money allowed them to breathe, allowed them to take care of their kids, allowed them to be entrepreneurs, allowed them to plan for the future, allowed them to feel healthy. And I was just shocked at how similar the conversation was, which I think gets to the point that this is a global issue, a global conversation, and we all need each other to get to the end goal.
Okay, thank you. So Scott.
Yeah, Guy, I think you'll appreciate this story to kind of answer your question, at least for part of it. And so I was in like this webinar with some staff members from various members of Congress. It was a bipartisan webinar with Republicans and Democrats, and the discussion was about the details of what they would want to see in a CTC if we're able to get that, in 2024, 2025, what that would look like. And the Republican, one of the Republicans was like, okay, we are going to draw a red line on this unconditionality. Like, we will not accept unconditionality. It has to have a work requirement, but we're okay with universality. And the Democrat responded after they were done. It was essentially, we are not okay with a work requirement. It needs to be unconditional, but we don't want universality. So there's a real challenge there. And I like to say basic income is not left or right, it's forward. And from that same reasoning, there's both sides dislike even different parts about it, which is one of the reasons why it's so challenging. And I would also say that when it comes to universality, it's going to be such a challenge. Like I really, even with the pandemic, I really thought that that was going to be something where they were going to throw means testing out the door and be like, look, we got to get money to everybody and we'll just tax them back after the fact. And they didn't even do it then. Like it needed to be targeted then. And it was arguments over, do we draw the line at 75,000? Should we draw it at 100,000? All these arguments over phasing it out. And so I think when it comes to like, how do we get universality in the US? And when it comes to these pilots, I think that, again, I think the stories are important where we need to be better about telling a story of universality. So even if these pilots are focused on certain things, I think we need to expand that out. Like I mentioned, various other potential stories that we're not doing that I think would be much more impactful for Republicans. Like let's look at coal miners and veterans and first responders and farmers. Like let's get these stories that can be more impactful and kind of paint this picture of look at what society could be like for all these different people, hopefully, and then someone can see themselves in that. And hopefully through that large kind of tapestry, maybe we can improve the odds of universality. But yeah, I think that is really going to be a challenge because they think universality and then it's always, oh, that costs more and oh, that's, can't give it to the rich and all this stuff that makes it really challenging.
Yeah. Let us take a couple of additional questions. Yeah, in the back. Please identify yourself and make a brief question.
Hello, I'm Eric and I'm an associate of UBI Taiwan. So UBI Taiwan is giving $300 per month to a single mother in Taipei as a part of a documentary we are filming to raise awareness on the social struggles and financial struggles of single parents and how basic income can help them. So this question is more directed at Mr. Tubbs, and we want to ask, what are some advices or insights the panel has for our program about these groups of single parents from the previous pilots that, for example, gave single mothers in Stockton $120 worth of gift cards during the pandemic? What were some of the main concerns single mothers had during this pilot, and how did basic income alleviate these pressures? Thank you.
Okay, let me ask a question. So storytelling is a powerful tool for movement to inspire people. But as an academic, I'm also interested in quantitative data, especially you have multiple levels of payment and multiple lengths of periods for the pilots. So that will be kind of a natural experiment if we combine all the quantitative data. So besides some local universities research, are you contrasting the whole quantitative data, or just because of time constraint, we have to limit the response 1.5 minutes each. Michael? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'm gonna talk really fast. To your question, sir, we established a Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the University of Pennsylvania. So right now they're evaluating sort of 30 of the mayor-led pilots throughout the country. And that report, which will be both qualitative and quantitative, will be out sort of in the next year. And to the first question around giving money to single mothers, as a son of a single mother, first, thank you for your leadership and foresight. And I think on the storytelling piece, that's again another powerful story to tell, because I don't know what it's like in Taiwan, I know in the States that single mothers are stigmatized a lot. And they're treated as if they're less than, when they're actually some of the most creative and resourceful people. So I think sort of highlighting those stories and showing how cash allows people to parent. It allows folks to provide for their kids, and also sort of fighting head-on stereotypes around single women. It is a powerful and important tool. So just be very deliberate about how you do that, and do it with care.
I just want to emphasize too that like what we're really doing is fighting like negative stories, like these negative anecdotes. Like the data doesn't exist really to be against basic income. You know, if you look into the evidence that's out there, we know that it works, but people have these stories in their minds, and those stories we have to overcome. And actually, I wanted to answer the previous online question just really quickly too, which was like every pilot around the world is inherently like a global story. Like it was really interesting with the Wales pilot recently, where there was just an article that came out. I can't remember where it was published, The Guardian maybe or something. And like people there in the UK were impacted by this and wanted to talk about it. But then that spread everywhere too. So we had like, you know, the US was really interested in this, like, what? $2,000 per month? That's crazy. And so that really generated a whole news cycle around that. So every time there's some kind of pilot somewhere, it can get into the consciousness around the world just because we're such a, you know, thanks to the internet and everything.
Thank you. So I know Michael has to leave. Yeah. So please join me in applauding Michael Tubbs and Scott Sentence for giving wonderful presentation and answers to questions. And let us hope America will be very successful in this guaranteed income movement, which will over time develop into a more universal direction, and hopefully competing with Korea to be the first country in the world to introduce universal basic income. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Michael. So now we have three other presenters. Yong Hye-in, member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea and leader of a basic income party in Korea. So you will speak 15 minutes first, and then Aida and Eduardu will speak for 15 minutes each.
네, 반갑습니다. 기본소득당 소개받은 기본소득당
My name
상임대표이자
is Yong Hye-in,
국회의원입니다.
standing representative of the Basic Income Party and a member of the National Assembly, and also a co-chair of the organizing committee of this year's Congress.
많은 분들이 참여하고 있는
It's a great honor for me to be presenting in front of so many people from home and abroad.
원래 오늘 제 발표의 제목은 대한민국
The title of my presentation
민권운동과 과제입니다. 원래는 지난
was
7년 동안 대한민국에서
the
벌어진 다양한
challenges and tasks
그리고 지난
of
범주형
the politics of
기본소득
basic income in South Korea.
몇몇 의원들이
So,
국회에서 발의한 기본소득 법안들
preparing for the presentation, actually, I thought that I would be sharing with you our 7 years of experiences of pilot programs, categorical basic income schemes of municipalities, basic income bills submitted in the National Assembly, and changes in the position of political parties and civil society organizations on basic income. However, I have learned that in parallel sessions, these issues will be discussed more in detail, and today I'm going to make a new proposal. I think everyone here is aiming for a great transformation where basic income is introduced globally in the mid to long term. However, we are yet to realize basic income on a national level. I believe now is a time that we need to think about more diverse and flexible political strategy based on different contexts of different countries. So today I'm going to make a proposal about the basic income campaign strategy in 2023, considering the political and social conditions of Korea. Of course, I do not represent all basic income advocates or politicians supporting basic income in Korea. However, please understand that my proposal is based on my several years of experience as leader of the basic income program. My PowerPoint is in English in the booklet, so please refer to that. A keyword in my presentation is the limitations of the politics of redistribution in Korea. Now, basic income is understood as an extension of the politics of redistribution in Korea. But I doubt whether that is a really effective strategy. And I think maybe we need to place basic income on a different
OECD와 G7 국가들과
different
비교한
position
한국의 재분배 현황을
in order to
말씀드리도록
bring about
하겠습니다.
basic income. Let us
간단
first take a look
수치를 몇
at
가지를
the state
보여드리려고
of
하는데요.
redistribution in South Korea compared to the OECD and
GDP
G6.
변화에 관한 표입니다.
Now, this table shows the
왼위가
GDP
OECD
coefficient before and
평균
after
보이고요.
taxes and
가운데가
public
G7
transfers.
국가들의 평균이고 맨 아래가
So you see the OECD
대한민국입니다.
average, G6 average,
보시는
and
것처럼
Korea
한국은
in the bottom.
조세와 공적 이전
As you can
소득의
see,
역할이 극도로
the role of
미미하다
tax and public
합니다.
transfer in Korea is very small. Now, the inequality of market income is relatively small. However, inequality actually gets worse after tax and public transfers. So you can say that redistribution is not working in Korea. Now, this table shows total tax revenue as a percentage of GDP again compared to OECD and G7. Now, the total tax revenue as a percentage of GDP can also be called national burden rate.
10년씩을 기준으로 평균을
Now,
냈습니다.
you can see 3 decades and averages for each of them. So the national burden rate of Korea increased by about 30% from the 1990s to the 2010s, but still much lower than the OECD and G7 averages. Moving on to the total social expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Now, in Korea, this number means the public social welfare spending and statutory private spending combined. As you can see, it's increasing in Korea over time, but still lower than the OECD and G7 averages. Let's take a look once again at these two statistics with a more recent data. So when you combine national burden rate and social welfare expenses, it's 57% in Korea, much lower than the 73% of G7 average, which means that the Korean people are not receiving as much as they are paying. This is why the public are largely resisting any tax increase. Recently, these numbers are increasing, but it's not because of policy changes of the governing party, but because of natural changes due to economic growth, low birth rate, and aging population. Let us look at one more statistics, productivity growth. Again, Korea's productivity has been growing actually faster than the OECD and G7. Putting all these numbers together, we can say that Koreans are not enjoying social welfare according to the productivity growth. So, what are the reasons for structural reasons for this situation? And what are the challenges for the politics of redistribution in Korea? I think most of Koreans here have experienced this. When you go to a foreign country and when you say you're from Korea, you're always asked north or south. As you know very well, the Korean Peninsula is still divided. Now, the Korean War, which was the hot war, made the division of the Korean Peninsula
지난 70년 동안 한국
violent
사회가
and
이
permanent, and
반동주의를 벗어나지
70 years have
전체
passed.
강도가 조금씩
And
약해지긴
over the last
했지만
70 years, South Korea is still captured by anti-communism or McCarthyism.
그리고 분배 혹은 재분배를 요구하면 그
Still, many people
공산주의와
believe that any talk about distribution or redistribution
이거를 기본소득이랑 좀
is
연계해서
related to communism.
기본적으로 조세는 재분배와 직접적으로
So linking that to basic income, basically tax is not directly directly linked to redistribution, but indirectly through the government in a non-transparent manner. Now, tax-based basic income shows this direct relationship of burden and benefit. That is why this anti-communist sentiment, which is generally against redistribution, is adamantly opposed to tax-based basic income. Second, the export-oriented economic structure of Korea was based on a historical low-cost regime. The low-cost regime was necessary in order to make sure that the exporters have price competitiveness. After 1998, with the financial crisis, the low-cost regime became even more consolidated because of the neoliberal tax cut tendency. Still, the public opinion is not favorable to redistribution for welfare, partly because of the huge influence of conglomerates. Of course, after democratization, trade unions have become stronger and corporations started to provide welfare to their employees. However, that did not lead to the progress of redistribution politics on the national level. Now, conglomerates have been very effective in protecting their share in this politics. Now, in Korea, after the finish of the establishment of welfare states, there has been little change in the national burden rate. However, in Korea, there is a strong resistance to the path from low cost to middle cost regime. However, that is why I believe that just campaigning for tax-based basic income is inadequate in overcoming this historically formed low-cost regime, export-oriented economy, and people's experience based on that. Now, another structural reason is that people strongly believe in a very particular way of increasing their asset, which is buying real property. People still believe that real property always prevails. This is partially true because in the Korean economic structure, if the real estate market collapses, the entire economy collapses. However, now this way of increasing asset is unequal on the starting point and also on the finish line. However, with real estate development making progress rapidly and in a large scale, opportunities have been provided to a huge number of people in Korea randomly. We cannot deny that fact. Therefore, the middle class in Korea who have the experience are strong potential supporters of tax cuts. Recently, Korea was also swept by this Bitcoin frenzy. For those under 40 who have less capital to make investment in real property, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are still very popular. I believe that maybe these younger generations who would be participants or victims of this casino capitalism might be another group supporting tax cuts in the future. So with these structural reasons, the representation of politics of redistribution is very weak. When you have a simple survey about tax increase and redistribution, the public opinion seems favorable. However, political parties in the National Assembly do not debate over tax cut versus tax increase. They agree in general about tax cuts, and they just debate over who should be given more benefits or more tax cuts. Now, this tendency is gets even stronger when you approach elections. In Korea, we have a single-member district simple plurality system for the National Assembly, and we have big elections every 2 years. With this, belief that real property always prevails, and with a huge regional inequality, local development is always key in elections. Those with a lot of assets have a very clear reason and purpose to participate in politics. So they are more highly engaged in politics, and their influence is always overrepresented.
이런 구조적인 장벽들 속에서 대한민국 기본소득 정치 세력은 어떤 전통적인
On top of this structural barriers, the politicians supporting basic income also have uncomfortable relationship with the established progressive movement. To summarize, the traditional welfare state supporters believe that basic income and traditional welfare programs are in a zero-sum game, and they are explicitly or implicitly against basic income. Recently, the representative of the governing party went on a vacation with a book titled Criticism of Basic Income, which was written by a former member of the Democratic Party, the main opposition, who have been championing for welfare states. Now, that author does not represent everyone, but there is a general tendency that the traditional welfare state supporters have a misunderstanding of basic income as unrealistic demand or a proposal to destroy all existing welfare regimes. Now, I can understand that position to some extent because in reality, we have failed to move away from this low-cost regime, but I do not agree with them. I think basic income and traditional welfare programs should expand at the same time. And it's regrettable that we are not seeing that. And President Yoon, who took power last year, declared that he's going to focus on alleviating poverty rather than reducing inequality as a whole in the society. And I think his position has some affinity with the traditional mainstream welfare state supporters. Of course, President Yoon is going to reduce the entire scale of welfare, I think. There is a possibility that the welfare state supporters and basic income advocates might join forces in the future. Now, the labor movement is virtually against basic income.
노동조합이 기본소득을 주장하는 국면이
For the labor movement in Korea, wage increases and employment security on company level is always a priority. Now, there is another challenge of organizing a group of advocates. Of course, we have the Basic Income Party, who have been members of the Basic Income Korea network for a long time. but our power is very weak. So I think at this point in time, it's our priority to organize the supporters of Lee Jae-myung, the representative of the main opposition, as sympathizers of basic income campaign. So I talked about the current situation of redistribution in limitations. So a new proposal I'd like to put forward is to move beyond tax-based basic income toward equity-based basic income. I said beyond because I don't mean that we have to give up on tax-based basic income. I want to say that we need to expand the scope of basic income politics. Running out of time, I know. So, as I explained earlier, we have structural challenges of the Korean economy, so we need a new strategy. That's why I'm talking about equity-based basic income. In parallel sessions, you will learn about the Shinan County models. So, to summarize, so I propose that we place equity-based basic income at the center of our campaign and reduce our political burden of having to focus on tax increase. Well, I wanted to explain more detail about my strategy, but because of time constraint, I have to wrap up. I hope I can talk more about this in the Q&A. Please ask questions about this. Thank you.
I'm very sorry. But now, Aida, so Professor Wilgen de Vizcarra yesterday mentioned Catalonia's pilot program. Not as a good example, but anyway, we can learn from not always from fantastic things, but from various experiences. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting representation of the office of the pilot project to implement the UBI in Catalonia. And thank you for putting together this Congress because you can tell there's been a lot of work behind it. So thank you. So my name is Aida Martinez. I'm a data analyst at the office to implement the pilot project of UBI in Catalonia. And I'll be talking about the Catalan pilot, but not so much about the design itself and methodology, which I think it's innovative enough to talk about it in detail next Saturday on the concurrent session. So today I will be focusing on the politics that have been surrounding the pilot, both before it happened, and so it made it happen, and what's happening now, and what will likely happen in the future with it. So I'll be talking about the Catalan context, the Catalan pilot, very summarized, and the political background that we come from, and some implications. So where we are now, the public opinion on UBI, and the public opinion on conducting a pilot project before implementing a UBI in Catalonia. So about the Catalan context, one of the most important data, I think it's important to show you, is the poverty risk rate before and after social transfers. Not only the exact number after all transfers, but also what's been happening since 2004. So as you can see, the poverty risk rate has been more or less the same. It has increased a little bit since 2004, both before and after transfers. So it means that we are facing a society where there's a chronification of poverty in 20% of the Catalan population. It means also that the current system that we have now may not be functioning as it should, because otherwise we should be experiencing an improvement after transfers. So the population of Catalonia is close to 8 million people. The unemployment rate right now is 8.4%, which is not as high as in other parts of the country of Spain, but it's higher than in other countries in Europe. As I said, there's almost a 20% of people living under poverty risk threshold. And I wanted to explain a little bit, just a little example of why the current system of conditional benefits that we have in Catalonia and in Spain, it's not efficient enough. And apart from the stigmatization and all the flaws that these kind of systems have, it's not efficient to tackle poverty in our context. So we have a lot of benefits, as in most of the countries. There are so many benefits, and sometimes it makes people not even knowing that they can apply to some of them, right? But the most generalized and big ones are the IMV in a Spanish context, because it's a Spanish benefit. It's Ingreso Mínimo Vital, so life minimum income, and RGC, which is a Catalan benefit, Renda Garantida de Ciudadanía, guaranteed citizenship income. So the average monthly amount of those benefits in 2023 for one single adult living alone, it's 565 euros a month for IMV and 717 euros a month for RGC. If we compare those amounts of money with the poverty threshold in Spain or in Catalonia, we can see that the difference is so high, is so big, that even those that can apply and can get this benefit, they're still under the poverty threshold. So they cannot even live like dignified life in our current context, because of the material needs that they have to be facing are way more expensive than what they get. And another number I think we should be looking at when we think about the inefficiency of conditional benefit systems is about the coverage that those benefits have. So when I talk about coverage, I'm talking about the percentage of households that are actually under severe poverty and are eligible to get the RGC in the case of the Catalan benefit, for example. So we can see that only 42% of households living under on severe poverty can meet the criteria to actually get the RGC. So even when you're able to get all the criteria, and taking into example that you make it through all the process, you don't fight with stigmatization and so on, still there's more than 50% of households living in those conditions that couldn't meet the criteria for getting these benefits. So all in all, what it seems clear that an innovative solution should be happening to tackle nowadays problems surrounding poverty in Catalonia. So we ended up, after more than 1 year, designing a pilot that's very innovative, both in its methodology and also in what we want to know, talking about the specific outcomes that I will be explaining more in detail next Saturday. And I'll be very short in this, but summarize the amount of money that we wanted to be the cash transfer was going to be around the poverty threshold, because we believe that it should be covering the basic material needs. So for adults would be 800 euros a month, and for minors, 300 euros a month. The target population, we wanted it to be quasi-universal, so everyone should be included in the pilot project, except the 10% highest incomes. This exclusion is because we wanted to simulate a tax reform, because we believe in a UBI approach in which, if it was implemented as a public policy in Catalonia, it should be preceded with a tax reform to make it more progressive, so these 10% highest incomes wouldn't be getting a net gain from the policy. The length that we wanted it to have is 2 years, so we can see like midterm, let's say, results. And the sample is quite big compared to other pilots in Europe. And it's 5,000 people receiving the UBI, divided in a twofold design, dividing the sample into two. So 2,500 people would be participating in this pilot through an RCT design. The innovative part of the design is that the randomization unit wouldn't be the individual, as most of the RCTs do, but it would be the household. So everyone registered in more or less 1,000 households around Catalonia would be getting the cash transfer. This is because we wanted also to see the effects intra-household of what would a UBI look like. And the rest of the sample, the other 2,500 people, would be participating in the pilot in a saturation study where 2 different municipalities of around 1,200 people in each would be receiving the cash transfer. And we would have a synthetic control methodology to control the effects of this design. So how did we got here? For some, it might seem like the Catalan project came as a new project, but for some others, I'm sure you know that the UBI history in Catalonia comes back to 2001 at least, with different events that have made possible for us to actually have an office to implement a pilot project funded by the Catalan government. So in 2001, the Basic Income Network in Spain was established. In 2002, Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya, which is the actual party governing Catalonia, and Iniciativa per Catalunya Verds, which it's the Green Party in Catalonia, presented a proposal at the Spanish Parliament for a UBI law, which was cancelled after. In 2003, the Tinell Pact happened between Esquerra Republicana, Iniciativa per Catalunya Verds, and also the Socialist Party in Catalonia. And they included in this agreement that they would be redefining the minimum insertion income with the aim of making it a basic income for citizens while studying the different proposals for progressive implementation. So that was a big step for the Catalan government to be actually saying this. Then in 2011, the 15F movement happened after the financial crisis, and there was a generalized sentiment in Spain as of this system was unfair, wasn't just, and it wasn't actually working for most of the people. In 2014, there was a study published by Daniel Raventós, Lluís Torrents, and Jordi Arcarons about the feasibility of financing a UBI in Spain and in Catalonia. And the results were that the net cost of the policy were 3.5% of the GDP of the country, which is a lot of money, but it's not as much as some people try to say when they just do the simple math of multiplying the cost of the number of population of a country per the cash transfer. Okay, so then the most important aspect, I would say, that led to the creation of the office was the COVID-19 crisis. There were a lot of manifestos from the LGBTQ+ community, the artists, freelance workers, and so on, because we faced the reality that no one was safe in any job, even though we thought it was stable enough. So in December 2021, the office was created. What have the implications been around these pilot projects? So the first and most important of them is that the implementation hasn't begun yet. Why is that? Because where there was a voting at the parliament to vote for the annual budget of 2023, and one of the items of this budget was the budget to actually implement the pilot project. What happened was that the Socialist Party led a voting against the budget to the pilot, and the rest of the right-wing parties in the parliament followed. So only Esquerra, CUP, and Como Podem, which is like the Catalan Podemos, voted for the budget. So it's not cancelled, but it's frozen until we have the opportunity to go again to the parliament to have it approved. So an important thing about the office institutional design is that it was created separated from the annual budget, so we can still run it. And we are doing a lot of tasks to communicate the pilot project design and also the idea of UBI to make it more known in Catalan society. So very quickly, there was a public opinion poll conducted last year from September to November with a huge sample. And apart of other results, it was very interesting to see what happened with the support to UBI implementation and the party sympathy of the respondents of this survey. So what happened is, as you can see, the mean support of UBI implementation was 6.5, which is quite high, taking into account that, as you may know, there are a lot of people very against the UBI, so the mean can be leaned towards a very low number. So another important thing about this graph is that, as you can also see, there's only two parties, which is the far-right party, Vox, and the right party, PP, against the implementation of UBI. And the last important thing I would like to say about this graph is that, as you also can see, the Socialist Party sympathizers are agreeing with the UBI implementation on a 6.6. So that means something, given the fact that the Socialist Party led the vote against the pilot project in the parliament last March. Also, when we want to think about not the level of support of the implementation of UBI, but the level of support of conducting a pilot project on UBI, the support is even more horizontal and higher. So not even one party sympathizer, not even one party has lesser support than 50%, even Vox, which is a right-wing party, very neoliberal in its economic program. So, and another thing I would like to point out is that the party that led the voting against the pilot project budget last March, Socialist Party, has one of the highest levels of support. And the last graphs I wanted to show you is the level of support of three of the main characteristics that describe UBI, right? Individuality, unconditionality, and universality. So we can see that there's horizontal and pretty high support for each of the three of them. And unlike some of us may think, taking into account past speakers, in Catalonia, the characteristic that it's less supported, it's unconditionality and not universality. One of the reasonings behind it might be that maybe not everyone have so clear the difference between unconditionality and universality. That might be one reason. And another reason might be cultural context and the cultural prejudices on thinking, why should I get money, and then not being obliged to do anything about it. I hope you understood a little bit better about the politics surrounding the Catalan project. I really hope that we can manage to get the budget in the near future, so we are able to know more about the outcomes of the effect of a quasi-universal and truly unconditional UBI pilot project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Last presentation will be made by Eduardu Suplisi, former Senator of Brazil, and currently State Deputy of São Paulo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jong-sung, our chairman and colleagues in this table. Since in 1994, I was invited by Philippe Van Parijs to participate in the London Young Congress. More and more, each time in each meeting, I have learned a lot, and I want to thank you very much. Brazil is the first nation in the world whose National Congress, with the support of all parties, has approved in December 2002 by the Senate November 2003, by the Chamber of Deputies, a law sanctioned by President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in a beautiful ceremony on January 8th, 2004, in the presidential palace with the presence of Professor Felipe Vampares. The law 10,835 says that the citizens' basic income, a right of all citizens of Brazil, including foreigners living in Brazil for 5 years or more, sufficient to attend the basic needs of everyone with alimentation, education, health. It will be instituted step by step under the executive criteria, considering those most in need first, such as the well-known Bolsa Família program does it. So 10 years ago have passed, 10 years have passed since the president sanctioned the law that has not yet put fully into practice so far. I'm here today to tell you positive news, since I am confident that President Lula, who was our president from 2003 to 2010, was again elected in October 2002 for a new 4-year term. The Bolsa Família program was instituted by President Lula in October 2003. It provided a guaranteed income to poor families with income up to a certain level, as long as their children were going to school and that their parents took their children up to 6 years of age to take necessary vaccines according to the calendar of the Ministry of Health. In December 2003, there were 3.5 million families being beneficiaries of the program. Around 2014-15, there were more than 14.2 million families enrolled in the program. The Gini coefficient of inequality, as well as the number of families in conditions of absolute and extreme poverty, decreased substantially. The United Nations declared that Brazil had attained the stage of zero hunger in 2014-15. From 2016 on, the eradication of poverty was not so high, and we had a period of increasing the number of poor families in Brazil. From 2020 to 2022, around 10.1 million Brazilians had hunger, according to the United Nations report published in July 2023, representing 4.7% of the population. At the same time, however, the percentage of people that suffer from food insecurity has increased in the past years and reached 70.3 million people, a third of the population, according to the report of the State of Nutrition and Food Security by the Food and Agriculture Organization in 2022. On June 21st, 2021, on my 80th birthday, I had a dialogue with President Lula that is annexed to my speech here, that was streamed by his social media here, in which I tell him that I will do all my efforts to elect him again, as happened last October. And President Lula told me that he will put into practice the universal basic income during this government, 2023 to 26. Last March 17th, I had a conversation with Minister Wellington Dias of Social Development, in which I have made a suggestion to create a group of studies to see how we will reach the universal basic income. Last June 19, 2023, the law 14.601 was officially published, reinstituting the Bolsa Familia program that, back in substitution to the Brazilian auxiliary program that had been instituted by President Jair Bolsonaro. In the first paragraph of the first article of this law, it is said, the Bolsa Familia program constitutes a stage of the gradual and progressive implementation of the universalization of the citizens' basic income, established in the sole paragraph of the 6th article of the Federal Constitution and in the first paragraph of the first article of the law 10,835 of January 8, 2004. This law was signed by President Lula and his main ministers. It is relevant to know that last May, there was in São Paulo an important meeting, the Pact Against Hunger, that joined hundreds of people, including entrepreneurs, political and social movement leaders, social scientists, under the coordination of Mrs. Jaycee Denise, wife of an entrepreneur. The objective of the pact was to join people to make all efforts to completely eradicate hunger in Brazil until 2030. The Minister of Social Development, of Planning, the Governor of São Paulo, the Mayor, were there. Beyond nutritional and food security measures, it is my belief that the major objective of this pact will be attained as far as we advance in the direction of the universal citizens' basic income. The advantages will be perceptible. The reduction of bureaucracy, the elimination of all stigma or shame sentiment, and the raise of the degree of freedom and dignity of all human beings. In Development as Freedom of 1999, our Nobel Prize economist Amartya Sen says that development, to be meaningful, must signify a greater degree of freedom for all members of society. He illustrates this point with an example of what happened when he was a boy, about 10 years of age. His father was a good professor, and they lived in a good house in Dhaka, India today, but the capital of Bangladesh. It was India today, the capital of Bangladesh. A certain day, he was playing in the garden, and suddenly a man came through the gate asking for help. He had been knifed in the back. Amartya called for his father and accompanied him, taking that man to the hospital. On the way, he said, "Oh, my wife told me not to come to this region, characterized by ethnic struggles, but I had no other alternative than to come here to find a job for the survival of my family." When they arrived at the hospital, he had a strong hemorrhage and died. Amartya Sen concludes, typically, this man did not have real freedom. He had to put his life in danger to find a work opportunity. In the same form, that mother, that finding no opportunity to feed their children in São Paulo and decides to be a prostitute in a park, the Luz Park, as I could talk to them in a visit to the tea house of this park, and they agreed with me, or for that young fellow that having no other alternative to help in the budget of his family and becomes a member of the narco traffic gang. Well, this this man may be qualified as the man on the road of a very popular song in Brazil of Mano Brown. A man on the road reinitiate his life, his objective, his freedom that was lost, subtracted, and wants to prove to himself that he has finally realized that he has recuperated and wants to live in peace. He doesn't want to look backwards anymore. He wants to say to the crime, nevermore. Well, for that mother, that lady, or this fellow, once they have a basic income sufficient to attend his basic needs, both for himself and everyone in his family, this person will be able to say, no, now I don't need to accept this only alternative that appears in front of me, but that will be bad for me. Now perhaps I can wait for a while, make a course in my city with a good professor like Philippe Van Parijs, until one day I will find a job more in accordance with my will. And that's why the basic income will raise the level of dignity and freedom of everyone. And that's why I believe so much in this proposal. Our society will gain with the economic benefit once you amplify the consumption market, hitting the economy with a multiplier effect on the national product, greater taxes collection, greater job opportunities, and development for the people. According to the research, and inequality produced by Oxfam, together with newspaper Folha de São Paulo, 96% of the Brazilians believe that the country must guarantee the necessary resources for the income transfers. There is strong support, 56%, for the increase in taxes to finance social policies. The research also shows a massive support, 85%, for the increases on the taxes of the rich people to fund social areas. So the federal government has recently revealed that the fiscal incentives in 2002, last year of Bolsonaro's government, sum 581 billion, corresponding to 5.86% of gross national product, the highest since 2016. This has happened, although in the first day in office, the Minister of Economy, Paulo Guedes, made severe criticism about those private pirates and corrupt bureaucrats that collaborated for the creation of incentives. In 2023, according to the projection of Unafisco, the national government will not collect 641 billion in taxes because of fiscal incentives. Those are relevant data if we think on how to move towards the universalization and unconditionality of the citizens' basic income. So I had prepared so many other things, but I would like to tell you at least that I have a study here that says that the universal basic income proposal will diminish very much the Gini coefficient of Brazil. But I would like to tell you shortly that since my childhood, and adolescents, mostly because of recent examples from my parents. Being the 8th of 11 brothers and sisters, I became more and more interested in studying if there were a solution for Brazil to become a much better and civilized society. If we really want to build a just and civilized society, we need to take into account the values that aren't only to look for our personal progress, but to look for what is happening beyond the walls of our home, to take into account the values that were so well expressed by Martin Luther King Jr. in his beautiful speech, I Have a Dream. I have a dream that one day in the red hills of Georgia, the sons of ex-slaves and the sons of ex-owners of slaves will be capable to sit together in the table of fraternity. If we want to build a just society, we need to put into practice the instruments of economic policy that will raise the level of justice, such as the abolition of slavery, the provision of very good quality of education to all boys and girls, to all adolescents, to all adults, including those who had no opportunities when they were children, to provide a good quality of health assistance in urban areas and rural areas, to expand the opportunities of microcredit to all those who have no capital but have capacity to lend a small sum to buy an instrument of work, to have a better chance of survival, and be able to pay in 12 or 24 months that credit, to stimulate forms of solidarity economy or cooperatives. And of course, if we may institute a universal and unconditional citizens' basic income, if we raise the level of justice in each society, we will have peace in each country and between countries, as Pope Francis has been recommending. Well, let me just finish saying that this is the third time that I am visiting South Korea. Once more, I want to make a proposal that I had already expressed in previous visit. South and North Korea would give an extraordinary example to the world if you here agree in establishing a universal basic income to all inhabitants of both South and North Korea, for 52 million in South Korea, 26 million in North Korea, almost 80 million inhabitants. Certainly, Pope Francis, who argued so well in favor of the universal basic income in his last book, Let Us Dream Together, he will be very happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So there will be Catholic Youth Conference, Catholic Youth gatherings in 2027. So Pope Francis too will be visiting Korea. And that year we'll have another presidential election when I believe universal basic income candidate will win the election. So we'll see that. So very wonderful, very wonderful story from Brazil. Very exciting story. Thank you for the also your lifetime advocacy for basic income. Yeah, we appreciate that. And officially, we have 4 minutes and 21 seconds. But I lobbied the organizing committee, so we have 15 minutes. So, so yeah, questions? Yes? Identify yourself and make your question brief.
Okay, so I'm Thijs Lane. I investigate public opinion about basic income. And I want to ask a question about the South Korean case, but it probably also applies to the US, I think. So I understood from the story that in public perception in South Korea, basic income is often associated with communism. And that reminds itself of a time that you don't want. And I'm curious about this because I've seen traces of this as well in Eastern Europe, where people would be against basic income because it reminds them of the Soviet era and the loss of freedom that they experienced during that time. Now, I think we all know here in the room that this association between communism and basic income, it's nonsense. But in public opinion, it seems to be that something is there. So my question is, how can we effectively combat this association that people seem to make? I assume also in the US that Scott has come across this argument that basic income is communism, which it isn't, but how do we combat it? That's my question.
Other questions? Let me collect some questions. And here. There, Mr. O first and then Philip.
Thank you for all presentation. I am Junho Oh. I am a co-chair of a Basic Income Party of Korea. I'm asking to Ida about the Catalan pilot. I'm so sorry, a pilot didn't begin yet. Do you think you can find other new political partner or political support to begin to start a pilot again? And do you think whether you should change your strategy or not? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Philip?
Yeah, my question was also to Aida. The experiment in the plan of the experiment in Catalonia was particularly ambitious if you compare it to the Finnish one. For example, the number of people involved is far higher. It was 2,000 in Finland, 5,000 in Catalonia in the Catalan plan. But the amount that is given to the people is considerably higher, 800 in Catalonia and 560 in Finland. Moreover, Catalonia is only one region within a broader state. And my question is this. So in the Finnish case, they replaced systematically the existent guaranteed income for the beneficiaries by the basic income. In Catalonia, you're in the plan, so you had these 800 per person, but would these people be entitled to the ingresso minimo vital, and to the Catalan system, or is this being replaced by the system? And that's related to the political question, because in order to do that, you need to have collaboration both with the Catalan government and with the national government in order to make such an experiment feasible. At first sight, it's hopeless.
So one more question. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, also a question for Ida. So my question to Ida really is, so there's two very different ways to think about what went wrong in a way with the Catalan pilot, the politics of it. The one is, this is really about basic income. Could be the cost. It could be, for example, the existing issues between the minimum ingresso vital that already is at the federal level or the national level is very much strongly pushed by the socialists, and then perhaps the Catalan socialists have to link into that as opposed to the basic income. But there's a very, very separate story, which is to do with the fact that, there was a lot of friction in Catalan politics, changing from majority government to minority government and the Junts leaving. And is there a sense where the Catalan pilot may just have been a victim of just regular Catalan politics, and in a sense that they had to kind of figure out a program, they had to signal political strength and some of the issues as part of that parliamentary vote. And in a way, it could have been something else. Perhaps this isn't about basic income, but basic income somehow just became a victim of pre-existing politics.
Okay, yeah.
네, 용해인 의원님께 질문 드리겠습니다.
A question for Ms. Yong. So you made a proposal about moving beyond tax-based to equity-based basic income. At the same time, we also talked about the power of storytelling in the demonstration of effectiveness. So do you think equity-based basic income proposal is more important than the storytelling? And why are you proposing that new strategy?
Online audience. So Alexander again.
Okay, thank you. I forgot last time to introduce myself. My name is Alexander Imik. I'm based in Japan. And my question is to Representative Yong about politics and especially about platform experience, because I read about the situation of the Basic Income Party, and is this platform with the Democratic Party, would this be a good solution also for other countries? Because here in Japan, it's also basic income is very weak because of Confucian work ethics. People think just giving money is a bad thing. But COVID changed something. Money was given in this time. So it is a bit on the agenda, but it has to be put on the political agenda. And here it would be also a possibility for, not for me, I'm not a Japanese citizen, but for doing something on a platform.
Ask a question just.
Yeah, and the platform would be, would this be a model also for East Europe, for East Asia? Thank you.
So I have to close the questions, and yeah. Anyone? Just one more, or yeah. So yeah. So Yong-in, would you go first? Yeah.
네, 일단 공유지분형 기본소득 도입.
First of all, let me explain more about this equity-based basic income strategy.
의미가 있고,
So I think this is politically relevant now, and I think it can be part of a movement for a great transformation of the Korean society.
네. 그런 면에서 저는 이제 공유지분형 기본소득 아니면 이제 공동 소유형 기본소득의 의의를 조금 더 구체적으로 표현을 해보자면,
I want to elaborate more on the meaning of the equity-based basic income. I think this is a campaign for commoning for the 21st century and a process of building an alternative society.
노동으로 배치할 뿐인 이 신자유주의적인 자본주의의
In
실패를
neoliberal capitalism, people are forced into labor, and market is the only thing that remains. In really existing socialism, state was the only thing that remained, and people were again forced to labor. And in the 21st century, we need a new alternative, and for that, equity-based basic income will be relevant.
제가 제안드리는 건
So my suggestion is to combine basic income with climate crisis response. So we need to invest in energy transition industries.
미중의 패권 갈등 속에서 이 지경학적 위기 그리고 국제 안보의 위기로 등장하는
And we need to also respond to the rapid development of cutting-edge technologies, which is also fueling US-China tensions. So we need to also invest in developing these new technologies. Now, the Korean economy has an experience of a very fast, compressed economic development, where state played the role of patient capital, investing in innovations for a long time. So my idea is to do the same thing this time with equity shared by the people and investing in new industries. And also, there was a question about, associating basic income with communism. And I think, to overcome that myth, my proposal is also effective because it's about investment in industries. And about the experience of Basic Income Party using a platform with the Democratic Party to enter the National Assembly. Now, the Basic Income Party was the first single-issue party in Korea, and actually the name itself sounded very strange to many people at the beginning. So in the last parliamentary election, we decided to create a common platform with the Democratic Party to explore the possibilities of this single-issue party in the National Assembly. But I'd like to say that that was a very unique political context in Korea. So I'm not sure whether the same strategy can be used in other countries. But I think as a whole, the basic income movement should always look for building a larger coalition. I was unable to understand this another point about COVID and people's change in the attitudes. Do I have to comment on that? Maybe you need to take another time on that. Moving to Aida.
Yes, thank you for the question. So I'll start with Philippe because I think that the other both questions.
2 minutes, please.
Well, I'll try. So very quickly, Philippe, yeah, our design is very innovative and very challenging. We are aware of that. But the thing about the conditional benefit system in Catalonia is that no one can have the ingreso mínimo vital only. So the ingreso mínimo vital, it's a possibility of a complement on top of the RGC, the Catalan RGC. So it means that, we were in negotiations with the social ministry of the Catalan government, and they agreed that we could implement the pilot project, and for people that actually had the RGC or the complement of the IMV, they could have the benefit not canceled but frozen for the 2 years of the pilot. So that way, if at the end of the pilot they still met the criteria to keep receiving the benefit, they wouldn't have to wait long months and go into the process all again. So we could make them have an easier way into the system if they still need it. So I hope that answered. And very quickly, the other two questions. So as you saw when I was talking about the political background of the UBI history in Catalonia, is that once upon a time in 2003, the Socialist Party was for writing an agreement saying that they were working towards a basic income, so they didn't have a problem with that then. Before February this year, another Catalan party called Junts per Catalunya, they were an associate with the current government in Catalonia, and they worked together on the budget that then afterwards they denied and they voted against. I would say I agree with you, Jürgen, when you were saying that maybe the freeze of the Catalan budget to the pilot, it has to do not so much about being against basic income, because as you could see when I show you the graphs, the public opinion support, it's quite horizontal and high. It has more to do with everyday politics, I would say, because once they were a majority government and then Junts per Catalunya left the government because of some other reasons, and then Junts per Catalunya voted against most of the things that the current government proposed in parliament. So we are aware that this, if it changed so quickly in a matter of 5 months, it could change again very quickly on the next 5 months. So about another party to support the budget for the implementation of the pilot project, it could be Socialist Party, It could be Junts per Catalunya, or we could maybe have other surprises. We never know. Yeah, thank you.
So that means you have a chance. Yeah. Okay. So, Eduardo, would you make some final remark? Yeah. Is he going? Scott, what you can make 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to answer the communism question, I just want to throw another log into the fire here between Eduardo and Guy, and suggest that maybe there needs to be more of an effort to make sure that people actually see and know about the Alaska dividend as a UBI. And as a result, it could be that conservatives would like it more and progressives would like it less. But I do think that that would help this communist kind of perception. And I also would say that, you know, there needs to be another person like a Milton Friedman around nowadays who's talking about it. And because when we say it's not communism and you're like outside the tribe, they don't care. But like if there's someone who's speaking to them from their own tribe and is really talking about it from a capitalistic sense, then they're not going to claim that it's communism.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott, for contributing for peace between myself and Guy Stanning. And so to move towards peace in the world between Ukraine and Russia, Palestine and Israel and other countries that are in war, I would, it's a tradition already at the Beyond Congress, we'll invite everyone to sing together the song for peace in the world, okay? Bob Dylan's, everybody will sing together, you'll know it. How many roads must a man walk down before you may call him a man? And how many seas must the white dove sail before she slips in the sand? And how many times must the cannonballs fly before they are forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And how many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? And how many years must some people exist, like the Korean people, before they are allowed to be free? And how many times must a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? And how many years must a man have before he can hear people cry? And how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
The answer is blowing in the wind. The UBI is at the threshold of implementation. So we will win. We will win. Thank you all for giving interesting, wonderful and inspiring presentations, and thank for the audience for carefully listening over time. So it's 11 past noon, but yeah, have a good lunch and we'll gather later. So you have an announcement from the organizer? Any announcement? No?
이번 세션은 여기서 마무리되었습니다. 다음 세션도 이곳에서 진행되며 1시 30분에 시작됩니다. 점심 맛있게 드시고 다음 세션 시작 전에 이곳으로 와주시면 감사하겠습니다. This session has ended. The next session will be held here and it will start at 1:03 p.m. Enjoy your lunch and please come here before the start. Thank you.